Have you ever walked up to your front door only to feel like you've just stepped into someone else's life? That's exactly what happened to me. After a week away, I was looking forward to coming home to my cabin, a place I'd poured my blood, sweat, and tears into. But as I turned onto my driveway, I saw the unexpected. A bunch of cars scattered in front of my house, like a party was going on in my absence. Who the hell was at my place? I parked and stepped out, confusion mixing with a growing sense of anger. This isn't right. The first person I saw was Diane, our local HOA president, standing on my porch with a smug smile, talking to a group of strangers. I froze in my tracks. My heart started pounding. She was supposed to be an authority figure, but here she was, looking like she owned the place, laughing with people I didn't even recognize. My house, my sanctuary, it didn't feel like mine anymore. "Jason, you're back early," she called out, her voice sweet as honey, but it did nothing to mask the underlying smugness. "We were just having a little gathering," she continued, gesturing toward the group as if they weren't even strangers. I felt my fists clench. "A gathering?" I shot back, my voice sharp. "In my house? Who the hell are all these people?" Diane's eyes widened for a split second, but she quickly recovered. "Oh, just making sure everything's in order around here," she said, her words dripping with false politeness. My stomach twisted in disbelief. This was my home. How dare she act like it was hers? I took a step forward, ready to rip into her. But before I could say another word, the sound of sirens filled the air. The police were pulling up. What the hell was going on? Why were the cops here? If you're enjoying the drama, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and share this story. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. The police car rolled to a stop, and Diane's face turned pale as she quickly pointed at me, shouting accusations. "This man broke into my house." What was her game now? And why was the police involved? Was I about to be arrested for trying to protect my own property? The sirens stopped, but the unease in my chest didn't. As the officers stepped out of their patrol car, Diane immediately took control of the situation. She wasted no time pointing directly at me. "He broke into my house," she shouted, her voice laced with venom. My blood boiled. Was she really doing this? Was I really being accused of breaking into my own property? The officers exchanged a glance, both of them visibly confused. "Is this true?" one of them asked me, his gaze now scrutinizing me like I was the criminal. I could feel the anger rising in my chest as I responded, "Of course it's not true. This is my cabin. I've lived here for years. I was just away on a trip." My voice was calm, but underneath, I was fuming. How had she twisted the story so quickly? How could she just call the cops on me like this? Diane, seeing that she wasn't getting the reaction she wanted, suddenly switched tactics. She was no longer just pointing fingers. Now, she was playing the victim. "You don't understand," she said, her voice trembling slightly, but her eyes were sharp. "I've been looking out for this neighborhood. I'm doing what's best for everyone here. You've been gone for far too long, Jason. I had to make sure the place was taken care of." Taken care of? I wanted to explode. How could she sit there, lying to the officers, making it seem like I wasn't even welcome in my own home? And to make it worse, the guests standing behind her, who I thought were my neighbors, started to murmur, shifting uncomfortably. Their eyes were on me, and I could feel the judgment, the suspicion. Some of them even started whispering among themselves like I had done something wrong. "Jason, we just wanted to help," one of the women said quietly. "Diane's been so involved in the neighborhood. Maybe you just don't understand." The betrayal stung, but I didn't have time to dwell on it. I had to stay calm. "I don't need your help, and I definitely don't need her telling everyone else how to live." I stood firm, locking eyes with Diane. "You've been lying to these people." "This is my house, my property, and if you don't leave right now, I'll have to make sure everyone knows exactly what you've been up to." Diane's confident smile faltered, and for the first time, I saw fear flash in her eyes. But before I could get another word in, the officer raised his hand, signaling for us to stop. He glanced at the other officer and then at me. "We need to check something." As the officers started to look over their notes, the air grew heavier. I could feel the tension rising. Diane had been so sure of herself up until now, but I could see her starting to crack. What would they find? And would it finally be enough to expose the truth about what she'd been doing? The officers were about to run my ID. But would that be the moment everything changed? The air felt thick as the officers checked their notes, exchanging looks that only added to the growing unease. Diane was practically vibrating with nervous energy, clutching the porch railing as if it was her lifeline. I could see her trying to stay composed, but it was slipping. Her earlier confidence had been replaced by something far more desperate. It was almost satisfying to watch her unravel. I stood there, my hands clenched by my sides, every muscle in my body tense. I could feel my anger simmering beneath the surface, but I had to hold it together. This was my house. How had she gotten away with this for so long? And why was I now standing here like a criminal? The whole thing felt like a bad dream. The officers weren't saying much, just reading their tablets and glancing at each other, but their silence made everything worse. They hadn't fully processed the situation, and I could tell they were confused. But Diane wasn't about to leave anything to chance. She shot me a quick, cold glance before turning to the officers, her voice smooth and practiced. I've been trying to get him to leave for months now. He keeps showing up uninvited, causing trouble. I'm just trying to keep the neighborhood safe. This man has been harassing me, stalking my house, and no one is doing anything about it. I felt my blood run cold. Harassing her? Stalking her? The nerve of this woman to say that, to twist the truth like that. My jaw clenched, and I could barely contain the rising tide of anger that surged through me. That's a lie, I snapped, but the officers didn't seem to hear me. One of the cops, a tall guy with dark hair, turned to me and asked, "Do you have ID on you, sir?" I gritted my teeth but nodded. "Of course I do," I said, reaching into my jacket pocket to pull out my ID. My hands were steady, but the humiliation stung, being treated like this in front of a group of strangers, like I didn't belong on my own land. The officer took the ID without a word, then handed it over to his partner. I watched as the second officer began typing something into his tablet, glancing back at me every few seconds, his expression unreadable. Meanwhile, Diane was staring at me like she had already won, her arms crossed, her lips curled into a smug smile. It was infuriating, watching her stand there as if the truth didn't matter. Seconds ticked by, dragging on like an eternity. The tension was palpable. The guests had gone silent, watching us with morbid curiosity. I could feel their eyes on me, waiting to see what would happen. Would I be arrested? Would they drag me away? I could already hear Diane's voice ringing in my ears. "I told you, he's dangerous. He's a threat to everyone." But then the officer's voice broke through the silence. "This says here you're the registered owner of this property," he said, holding my ID up in front of him. Diane's expression faltered. Just for a moment, but she quickly recovered, her lips twisting into a forced smile. "That can't be right," she said quickly, waving her hand dismissively. "There must be some mistake. I'm the HOA president, and this property falls under our rules. I've been taking care of it." I felt a rush of anger. She was still trying to pull that card. "No," I said firmly, stepping forward. "There is no HOA here. I made sure of that when I bought this land. You've been making up rules and pretending like you have some authority over me, but you don't. You're the one trespassing. You've been throwing parties in my home while I've been gone, drinking my wine, and letting strangers walk through my doors. You don't own anything here." Diane's face turned an unnatural shade of red, and for the first time, I saw cracks in her carefully constructed facade. The smug grin vanished, and she quickly shifted her weight, as if she was trying to regain control. "You don't know what you're talking about," she muttered under her breath, but I could see the unease in her eyes. She was losing her grip. The officer looked from my ID to Diane and back again, his confusion deepening. "So you're saying there's no HOA here?" he asked. "Exactly," I said. "No HOA, no rules, no authority. Just a bunch of lies." I was done holding back. "And you're not going to get away with it. You can't just take over my house, throw parties, and make people think you're in charge." Diane's eyes darted nervously. This was it. She was running out of excuses. But just as I thought she was about to crumble, the second officer looked up from his tablet, his face completely unreadable. "Sir," the officer said, his voice low but urgent, "we've found something else. It connected to your name." He turned the tablet toward his partner. "It's something Diane doesn't know about." Diane's face drained of color, and for the first time her mask slipped. What was it? What did the officers find, and would it be enough to bring Diane down for good? The officer's words hung in the air, and I could feel my pulse race. Something Diane doesn't know about? I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. The tension was thick, and I could see the flicker of panic in Diane's eyes. She wasn't playing it cool anymore. She was desperate, and that desperation only made me more certain I was about to expose the truth. The officer turned his tablet toward me and pointed to a section of the screen. "Jason, it looks like you've got military records connected to your name," he said. "Special operations. It says here you're a decorated veteran." I stood still, stunned for a moment. I had no idea where this was going, but then it hit me. The officer was setting the stage for what was about to come. Diane had no idea what was in my background, and now she was about to find out. Diane's face went ashen. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She shifted nervously on her feet, trying to hide the fear that was creeping into her eyes. That's not relevant," she stammered, but her voice was shaky now, almost pleading. "I'm just doing what's best for the neighborhood. Jason is a threat to all of us." The officer raised an eyebrow and looked at her like she was the one who had lost her mind. "Ma'am, I'm not sure who told you that, but it sounds like you've been misleading everyone here." He looked at me again, his tone now respectful. "You've served this country. This isn't a guy we need to be worried about, but you..." He turned his attention back to Diane. "You're the one causing problems here." I let out a breath, the weight of the moment sinking in. Diane's power, her control, it was all crumbling. It was my turn now, and I could feel the tide finally shifting in my favor. Diane opened her mouth to argue, but the words got stuck. The officer stepped closer, his voice sharp. "We're not done here, ma'am. We've still got more to look into." Diane's face twisted in panic as the officers motioned for me to step aside. I felt a rush of satisfaction. The truth was finally out, but what other secrets were lurking just beneath the surface? What was Diane hiding that could make things even worse for her? The officer stepped closer to Diane, his voice firm. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to cooperate. There's something else here we need to address." Diane's face was practically white now. The confident, in-control woman who had been calling the shots was suddenly a shadow of herself, clutching at whatever dignity she could salvage. I could feel the shift the moment everything turned. Diane had built her house of lies, and now it was collapsing around her. I took a deep breath, knowing this was my moment to end it once and for all. The security footage I had, every moment recorded, was about to expose everything. I reached into my bag, pulled out the small black hard drive, and held it up between my fingers. "You want the truth, Diane? Here it is," I said coldly. Her eyes widened in disbelief as she stared at the drive, trying to hide the sudden fear that crept up her neck. "This," I continued, "is the footage of you breaking into my house, letting people in, and pretending to be in charge." The silence that followed was deafening. The guests who had been laughing earlier, who had been backing Diane, were now looking at her in confusion. Their whispers were louder now, some of them backing away. Diane could feel the walls closing in around her, and I could see her shaking hands as she tried to regain control. The officer looked at me, his expression unreadable. "Do you mind if we take a look?" he asked, holding out his hand. I handed over the drive without hesitation. He plugged it into his tablet, and the screen flickered to life. The footage came up clear as day. Diane was seen unlocking my door, stepping inside like she owned the place, waving in her guests like they were all invited. I saw it, clear as crystal. Diane's lies were caught on camera. The gasps from the guests were immediate. One of them, a man who had been laughing along with Diane, stood up abruptly. "Wait, what? You've been lying to all of us?" The officer froze the frame on Diane's face. It was unmistakable. The smug grin, the false authority, all of it. Diane's face twisted, her confidence completely shattered. She tried to protest, but it was over. The room was turning against her, and I felt the victory surge within me. But what was her next move? Would she try to flee, or was she already preparing her next lie? The room was silent. No one spoke, but the weight of what had just happened settled like a thick fog. Diane stood there, her face pale as a ghost, as the evidence continued to play on the officer's tablet. The footage was undeniable. Her unlocking the door, ushering guests inside like it was her personal party house. I could see the other guests shifting uncomfortably, their faces flushed with embarrassment. One woman, who had been standing by the railing, gasped and covered her mouth in shock. "Wait, you mean this was his house?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. She looked from Diane to me, her eyes full of confusion. I took a deep breath, feeling a rush of vindication. This was it. Diane's empire of lies had crumbled, and there was no way out for her now. Diane's smile, the one that had made me feel so small and powerless just hours before, was gone. She tried to backpedal, her voice trembling with desperation. "You don't understand," she said, trying to sound authoritative again, but it was weak. "This neighborhood needs structure. I'm trying to keep us all safe. I was just looking out for everyone." The officer turned to her, his voice sharp. "You've been looking out for yourself, ma'am. And if you think this is just about some HOA drama, you're wrong. This is about trespassing, fraud, and impersonation of authority. And you're not getting away with it." Diane's shoulders slumped. She didn't say anything else, and for the first time it felt like I had the upper hand. The officers were already talking, making calls, and securing the evidence. It was over. One of the guests, the same man who had been laughing earlier, stood up quickly. "Wait, what about us?" he asked, his voice rising in anger. "You dragged us into this mess. What happens now?" The officer turned toward the man, his tone cold. "You'll need to come down to the station to give a statement. But for now, you're free to leave." Diane's eyes darted around, her body trembling as she finally realized her power over these people was gone. She bolted, running for the dock with the officers in pursuit. I could hear her shout, "You'll regret this!" "You have no idea who I am." But it was too late. The final moment was about to play out. Would she escape, or was her fate sealed? Diane's desperate sprint toward the dock was a blur of frantic movement. She was shaking, her heels clicking against the wooden planks as she tried to escape, but the officers were too quick. One of them caught up to her midway, grabbing her arm and pulling her to a halt. She twisted in his grip, trying to break free, but there was no escaping now. The sound of the handcuffs snapping shut echoed across the yard, and Diane's last hope crumbled. She let out a strangled cry, her voice filled with panic. "You don't know who I am! I'll sue all of you!" she screamed, her voice cracking with defeat. The officer calmly led her back toward the squad car, but her face was a mix of rage and fear now. The other guests had scattered, some already gone while others stayed behind, watching in silence, too stunned to speak. The smug man who had been supporting Diane earlier muttered under his breath, clearly embarrassed by what had just unfolded. "Unbelievable," he grumbled, shaking his head. I stood there, my boots heavy against the porch steps, feeling a quiet sense of victory wash over me. The anger, the frustration, it was all fading now. The silence of the cabin surrounded me like a warm embrace. This was my home, my land, and no one was going to take it from me. Not her, not anyone. The officers approached, their expressions neutral, but I could see the respect in their eyes. "We'll need you to come down to the station tomorrow to file an official statement," the taller officer said. "But tonight, this is your home again." If you've enjoyed watching Diane get her comeuppance and seeing the power of standing up for what's yours, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs a reminder. The truth always comes out. Thanks for tuning in, and stay tuned for more stories of victory over adversity.